At just 19 years old, I took 14 different pilot exams on 14 different subjects in the space of 6 months. And today I'll be explaining what those subjects were, starting with the hardest and finishing with the easiest. So to start with, what do you need to pass all of the exams? Each exam requires a 75% pass rate. They're all multiple choice, which, despite thinking it would be easier when I first started because they're multiple choice, it actually makes it quite difficult because you can find that some questions have multiple right answers and you've got to choose the more correct right answer. Just a really quick one, if you're interested in becoming a pilot, down below in the description I've got a link to one-to-one coaching and a free consultancy for anyone that is interested. I've also attached a form below, so if you're interested in getting short, simple videos covering each of these subjects, just let me know with the form that I've attached, and if I've got enough interest in it, I'll start making short videos covering those topics. Now anyway, let's get back into the video. The hardest subject that I did during my ATPL training, my pilot training, was Principles of Flight, or POF for short. I found it ridiculously confusing at times. Some of the concepts just made no sense to me at all. When it comes to physics, it's not my strongest subject. I did find it interesting how an aeroplane actually flies, but to the same extent, I found it incredibly difficult grasping the concepts and the physics behind it all. So for me, that was one of the hardest subjects that I did. So the next hardest subject I found was a subject called radio navigation, or RNAV for short. I found that really difficult. Again, it has a bit of that kind of physics aspect to it. If you're strong at physics, you might find these subjects easy, but I wasn't the best at physics, so I found those two subjects particularly hard because of that aspect. RNAV involves understanding concepts like radio waves, HF and VHF frequencies, satellite communications, and PBN systems. If you're strong at physics, then you probably thrive in these two subjects particularly. That leads on to another non-physics related subject though, in air law. Air law was one of those really kind of tedious subject which you had to just fork out a lot of content and were expected to basically just know it. For me, I don't really learn in that way. So it was quite difficult for me to get my head around some of the concepts in air law and just expect myself to memorize these concepts. So for that reason, I found air law a very, very tough subject overall. But generally, I think if you spend enough time reading through the content and you're good at memorizing things, especially literature, then I reckon that air law will be a decent subject for you. Not to mention, air law is generally one of the more important subjects. So if you keep that in the forefront of your mind, it might help you memorize some of the stuff. Next up, we have flight planning. So flight planning is one of those weird subjects. I kind of enjoyed it, but then I also didn't really enjoy it. I found it quite difficult at times because I hadn't ever flown before and it was quite hard to get my head around some of the topics that they were discussing there. So if you've never filed a flight plan or done any fuel or weight calculations, then it could be quite difficult. And for me, it was quite difficult because of that reason. I'd never done things like that in my life before. Now, if I look back, it'd probably not be one of the harder subjects because I do it so frequently. But at the time, it was quite a difficult subject for me, and there were some quite tough topics for me to get my head around. Next, we have aircraft general knowledge, or AGK for short. Now, that's split up into 3 different areas, and that's why I think I found it really tough, because there was engines and power plant, there was electrics, and there was systems. I thought power plant and systems weren't too bad. They were more practical, and you could kind of visualize the processes in which they were talking about. But I found electrics really confusing. And again, I think it might just be drawing back to the fact that my physics isn't my strongest. And some of the content was just really tough for me to visualize. Whilst with systems and power plant, I could visualize and I could understand where some of the topics were going. But overall, there was just so much content within that subject. So for me, I found it really difficult to kind of compress all of that content into just one exam. So those are my top 5 hardest subjects so far. So now we have the more mid-tier level subjects, which I found weren't as bad as those top 5, but they were still difficult in their own right. Starting from hardest to easiest again. First, we have Gen Nav. Now, general navigation was one of those subjects which was quite mathematical. And surprisingly, I quite liked the mathematical aspect of it. I liked that there was a method to everything that you could calculate, and there was always kind of a way of getting around the question. But it was really hard for me to engage in GenNav because the principles and things they were teaching at the time were quite dated, and a lot of those things we would never use in day-to-day life. So for me, I lacked a bit of motivation because of it. I did enjoy the mathematical aspect of it, like I mentioned. It was just repetition of the question. The question were always generally in the same format. Going down another level in terms of difficulty, we have instrumentation. Again, I'm quite a visual learner, so instruments was one of those subjects that I could visualize quite well. When it came to imagining how things were working, that kind of helped with instruments. To the same degree, I found it quite difficult because of the level of detail that the instructors were going into with regards to the content. It's just a matter of going into the instrument that they're talking about and trying to understand how it works. Next, we have operational procedures. And operational procedures was quite a tough subject, but I quite enjoyed it because it was very applicable to day-to-day pilot life. And generally, you have your own operational procedures within an airline. So that aspect of it I didn't particularly like. But in terms of getting an overview and kind of giving you a fundamental basis on what to lay your foundations for, I thought operational procedures was a relatively nice subject. But again, it was more so the volume that let it down, because there's just so much to learn in such a short space of time. So that leads on to the next subject, which is meteorology. Well, a lot of my colleagues and friends found meteorology the hardest of all the subjects. I think for me, again, because I'm quite a visual learner, I could visualize the topics that they were referring to. For example, with meteorology, they're talking about weather. So when it comes to learning about how a cloud is formed or what kind of cloud that you're looking at, for me it was quite easy to get into my brain because I just remembered what the terms were and then what the cloud actually looks like. It was more utilizing visual aids which helped me with meteorology. Now, there were other aspects which I did find a little bit difficult. For example, METARs and TAFs at the time. I'd never really interacted with anything like that before. But if I were to recommend something to everybody, if you download an app called AeroWeather, and then every so often, if you just go onto the app and try and read the coded form of the METAR, it has a simplified version, so you can switch it over and kind of like suss out what word means what. But if you go on it every so often, it might help you start reading and learning TAFs, especially if you're starting out and thinking about how I can get a head start with it all. Next, we have aircraft performance. Aircraft performance, quite a logical subject in the end. I actually quite enjoyed it because it was quite well formatted. It was more so, if I was to put it in really simple terms, drawing lines on a graph and then manipulating those lines to basically give you a result or an answer. I quite liked it because it was quite structured and there was a method to it. Again, that's probably my mathematical background, which helped me out a little bit there. So I definitely think that that was up there with one of the easier subjects for me. It's also one of those subjects that's really applicable to day-to-day life as an airline pilot. You do a lot of calculations with runway conditions, lengths, climb gradients. So those things are quite applicable to day-to-day life. That's probably another reason why I quite enjoyed it. So that's our top 10 in terms of the subjects. But now we have the easy level subjects. So these 4 subjects, not only did I find them the easiest subjects, but I actually enjoyed them more than all of the other subjects put together. So again, it might be a personal thing, but I think generally most of the guys that I flew with also preferred these subjects over the others. To start off with the top 4, we have mass and balance. I thought mass and balance was a nice subject generally because it was, again, coming from a mathematical background, I thought it was very methodical, logical, and I could understand why it would be needed in day-to-day life. And again, it's applicable to day-to-day life. Every time you get on board an aeroplane, your pilots are doing a mass and balance calculation. Not only is it quite important for us pilots, but it's also one of those subjects which you know you're going to use it in the long term. So automatically you feel more obliged to learn it, which is why I then ended up enjoying revising it. Next, we have VFR communications, and VFR communications also ties into the other subject which I was going to mention after this, which is IFR communications. These two subjects are so similar, so I'm going to put them in the kind of same bracket because you tend to get taught them together. And essentially, if you can listen to ATC talking on a radio on YouTube, you'll be able to pick up a lot of the content which is involved in VFR and IFR communications. Both of those exams were only 30 minutes though, so they were quite restricted on time, which is why they didn't take the first place. But you're always using IFR communications in an airline world. If you're doing PPL or CPL, you'll probably be using more of the VFR communications. The top place in terms of what I found to be the best and easiest subject would be human performance. Now, human performance was one of those subjects I just found it so interesting, as well as really applicable to day-to-day life. It was fun to learn. They talked about things like stress management, fatigue, hypoxia, all of these things that might influence you. And I think, to add to it, I had an absolutely fantastic instructor teaching me this area. I can't even stress enough how useful it is to have great instructors teaching you a course. So if you're ever considering doing any ATPL theory courses, make sure that the instructor that you're going with is absolutely on your level in terms of how you'd like to be taught. Because if it's not, then try and find someone else that is. Everybody learns differently. I like to be really hands-on and get visual cues. My instructor was really good at applying those things to real life scenarios, which really helped me. But like I said, everybody's different. So that's my list of 14 exams from hardest to easiest. I'd really like to know what you guys think and what you think would be the easiest and hardest subject, or if you've already taken them, what you think is the easiest and hardest subject in your opinion. If you let me know in the comment section, I'll definitely look through and I'll be interested to know what you guys think. And if you want to know how I revised for these subjects, just let me know in the comment section, and I'll hopefully make a video about it too. If I'm really honest with you guys, it was probably one of the hardest 6 months of my entire life. I had to cut off so many of my friends, so many of my family I didn't speak to during that period. And it was only 6 months of my life which I had to knuckle down and focus for. And then the rest of my life, I'm now living my childhood dream. So I'd definitely say to anyone that's starting out, if it looks like it's a massive mountain of subjects and books and piles of books ahead of you, please don't let that deter you, because I 100% guarantee it is worth it. And I definitely haven't regretted the decision I made to pursue it. If you work hard, you can definitely achieve whatever you want to. Just keep focused. Keep locked in and you'll get there. I promise you'll get there. For now though, thank you guys so much for making it to the end of this video. I really appreciate the support. If you could give me a like and subscribe to my page, I'd really appreciate it. And I've also got the one-to-one coaching and free consultation for anyone that's interested in flying. I really want to help you guys. If you could do that massive favor for me, I'll definitely not only improve the content, but continue making more for you so that hopefully I can help more and more people. Thank you guys very much, and see you soon.